Two friends, ages 16 and 17, spent a Saturday night with friends in town. About midnight, they headed back to one of the boys' houses to spend the night. Instead of turning in, about 12:15 a.m., they left the house with a flashlight and a rifle in hand to go hunting. Not much is known about what happened over the next few hours, but around 4 a.m., an engineer on a train was looking down at the train tracks as the train drove past town. He saw two figures lying on the tracks with a green cover over them. He laid on the horn and attempted to stop the train. There was no movement from the bodies on the tracks. The train hit the bodies and wasn't able to come to a stop for half a mile. The two bodies were later identified as the two friends that went hunting that night. Hi, I'm Mindy. Welcome to the Missing Link channel. Each true crime case and unsolved mystery is just one missing link away from being solved. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video and help us find that missing link. When I first started researching this case, I had no idea how far this story would go. I thought the Maura Murray case had a ton of rabbit holes, but this case definitely has its own share. It seems like so many people in the area, people who possibly witnessed this crime, and acquaintances to these two boys ended up turning up missing or dying under mysterious circumstances. I could literally do multiple videos about all the other crimes that could be connected to this case, but I have chosen to just look into this crime directly. I may mention a few similarities with other cases, but I won't go too in-depth for these other crimes and disappearances. But if you want to look into them yourselves, there is a lot available, including some references to a very powerful family in the United States. So who were these two friends? They were best friends, Kevin Ives and Don Henry. They were both starting their senior year in high school. They attended Bryant High School in Bryant, Arkansas. They both enjoyed fixing up cars and enjoyed spending time with their girlfriends. Larry Kevin Ives was born April 28, 1970. He went by Kevin, and he was 17 years old when he died on August 23, 1987. Donald George Henry was born September 30th, 1970. He went by Don, and he was 16 years old when he died on August 23rd, 1987. Let's look into this area. Bryant, Arkansas is located in Saline County, not far from Little Rock in central Arkansas. The current population is around 21,000. However, in 1987, the population was around 5,000. So Bryant was a much smaller town then compared to today. In the mid-1950s, mining was popular in the area. The railroad also had an influence on this town. When the railroad first started construction in the late 1800s, it brought people and businesses to this area. Eventually, a railroad was constructed, connecting Little Rock to Bryant. Let's go back to August 23rd, 1987. A group of high schoolers, including Kevin and Don, spent this Saturday night with friends in town. It was common for teenagers to meet in a local parking lot and just hang out. There wasn't a lot to do in this small town. About midnight, Kevin and Don headed back to Don's home to spend the night. When they arrived at the house, Don went inside and Kevin remained on the front porch. Don went inside and spoke to his father. About 12:15 a.m., Don left his house with a flashlight and a rifle. The boys decided to go night hunting, or what is known as spotlighting. This was actually illegal. Hunting after dark is illegal as well. Spotlighting is where one person finds an animal and shines the light into the eyes of the animal. This blinds or stuns the animal and gives the other person enough time to shoot the animal. The boys left Don's home and headed into the woods behind his house. What happened between 12:15 and 4 a.m.? We will speculate about this a little later. Let's jump ahead to what we do know. About 4:25 a.m., about a mile from Don's home, the Union Pacific Railroad train with 75 cars was headed from Texarkana to Little Rock. The train was traveling at least 50 miles per hour. The cargo the train was hauling weighed 6,000 tons. Inside the train, Stephen Schroyer, the train engineer, noticed something ahead of them on the tracks. As the train grew closer, he saw a light green tarp, which looked to be covering the lower half of two bodies. The bodies were lying side by side, face up, with their arms down by their sides and motionless on the tracks. Stephen immediately sounded the horn, but there was no movement from the bodies. He also noticed that there was a rifle laying parallel to the bodies in the gravel. He tried desperately to stop the train, but there was nothing he could do. It would take time to get the train completely stopped. It is hard to stop a train with a load of 6,000 tons. In fact, it took half a mile to get the train completely stopped. The railroad officials were informed of this incident. 25 minutes after the accident, about 4:40 a.m., police began to arrive on the scene. The boys' bodies were described as mangled. The light green tarp that had previously been covering the bodies was not located. The .22 caliber rifle, which was next to the bodies before they were hit, was taken into custody. It had been found laying next to the railroad tracks. After reviewing the scene, the police did not believe there was foul play involved. Instead, they believed the boys' deaths were caused by suicide or just a tragic accident. I mentioned earlier that the light green tarp covering the bodies was never located. But there is some controversy when it comes to that tarp. The police deny that the engineer told them anything about a tarp that morning. However, the engineer claims that he did tell the authorities that morning about the light green tarp. And the tarp is now missing. A lot of evidence was overlooked, and some evidence was even left at the crime scene. In fact, Kevin's foot was later found at the scene by a family member. How awful. Personal belongings of the boys were also found, but I could never determine what exactly these belongings were. The boys were soon identified for certain by their dental records. After the train accident, a witness came forward claiming that he heard gunshots in those early morning hours before the boys were hit by the train. The authorities were supposed to look into Don's gun, which was found by the railroad tracks, to determine whether it was fired that night. But these tests were never performed. So we will never know whether the gunshots came from that gun. Could the boys have had success hunting? Or was the gunfire from something much more sinister? Dr. Malik examined the bodies of Kevin and Don. A week after the boys died, the parents were informed that the cause of death was determined to be 2 accidental deaths due to THC intoxication. THC is found in marijuana, and it is the chemical responsible for most of marijuana's psychological effects. The police informed the family what they thought happened that night. They believed that the boys had smoked a large amount of marijuana, and then they must have fell asleep on the tracks. The police speculated that the boys were in a drug-induced coma, and perhaps they were unable to move after they fell asleep on the tracks. Dr. Malik stated that he believed the boys smoked 20 marijuana cigarettes. The authorities told the families that it was just a strange accident. The families did not believe this theory. The sheriff claims that he sent the boys' clothes to the FBI to be examined, but this wasn't the case at all. He instead sent them to the Arkansas State Crime Lab. The families hired a private investigator to look further into the boys' deaths. The investigators met much resistance when it came to dealing with the authorities. Did the authorities not want someone else looking into the boys' deaths? 6 months after the boys died, some of their belongings were handed over to their families. Don's jeans were returned to his family. This seemed odd to me. Wouldn't these jeans hold valuable evidence? While examining the jeans, Don's stepmom found a bag of marijuana in the pocket. How was this missed by the authorities? Or was it even placed there? Were the jeans never examined? The family began to wonder what else the authorities hadn't examined and what else they had missed. About 6 months after the boys died, a hearing was held. This was in February 1988. This hearing was to determine whether the original cause of death was correct. After 5 days of testimony, the cause of death was changed from accidental to undetermined. This wasn't exactly what the families were hoping for, but at least it was some progress. The families believe there was foul play involved and that the boys were murdered. The attorneys on the case were Dan Henry and Richard Garrett. Remember the name Richard Garrett. We will talk about him later on. There was a report found from that night when the boys were struck by the train. The report was from an EMT, and he stated that the boys' blood looked dark and that it looked like it lacked oxygen. Also, that it didn't appear fresh. And the boy's skin was colorless. This conflicted with the police original findings. Lack of oxygen in the blood and colorless skin would lead someone to believe that the boys died perhaps before they were lying on the tracks and hit by the train. A second autopsy was conducted on the bodies of Kevin and Don. Joseph Burton determined that one of the boys was already dead before being placed on the tracks, and the other boy was unconscious. This is a huge finding because if the boys were unconscious or dead before being placed on the tracks, this would point to homicide for sure. The evidence in this case was presented to a grand jury in April of 1988. It was alleged that the boys likely only smoked 1 or 2 joints of marijuana that night between the two of them. Would 1 or 2 joints really make 2 boys lay down on the railroad tracks, not hear the train's horn, and not move when the train was racing towards them? The grand jury believed that the boy's death may have been related to drug trafficking in the area. The grand jury's finding was that Kevin and Don's death were probably homicides. A third autopsy was then performed. The boys' bodies, as well as the evidence, were further examined. Don's autopsy showed that there were stab wounds found on Don's shirt. However, Don didn't have this shirt on when he was struck by the train. Kevin's autopsy showed that he had damage to the top of his head on the left side. Perhaps he was hit with the butt of a rifle, or perhaps another instrument. Due to these findings, their deaths were ruled a homicide. Was it likely that Don had been stabbed and killed before someone placed him on the tracks? And was Kevin struck by an instrument and either unconscious or dead, and he was then placed on the tracks? In the fall of 1988, the case appeared on Unsolved Mysteries. The attorney, Garrett, stated, "The boys saw something they shouldn't have seen, and it had to do with drugs." So what do you think happened to Don and Kevin in those early morning hours? I see 6 possible scenarios. And yes, some are more likely than others, but we will discuss them all. Number 1, did Kevin and Don commit suicide? This would be an odd choice for 2 boys to commit suicide in this manner. Both their friends and family did not think this was a possibility. Plus, the train engineer said that the bodies didn't show any sign of movement after he laid on the horn and the train was racing towards them. Would this be likely if it was a suicide and the boys were still alive until the train ran them over? I doubt this was the likely cause of their deaths. Number 2, did Kevin and Don die due to a drug overdose? The different doctors that performed autopsies had different determinations when it came to how much marijuana they had smoked that night. The first thought 20 marijuana cigarettes, and the other felt it was just 1 or possibly 2 marijuana cigarettes. That is a huge difference. However, there was evidence that neither alternative would have caused the boys to lay down on the tracks, not move, and get hit and killed by a train. The bodies were parallel to each other. Their location was described as too much of a coincidence. And if they were killed elsewhere and then placed on the tracks to destroy evidence or cause confusion, well, if this was the case, it sure worked. Do you think marijuana usage played any part in the boys' deaths? Number 3, were the boys murdered? As the case was examined more and more, it seemed like this was the most likely alternative. Number 4, if they were murdered, was it by someone they knew? Or number 5, were they murdered by a random stranger? A strange man had been reported near the tracks about a week before the boys died. He was seen in military fatigues. A police officer, Danny Allen, received a call to check on this suspicious man. When the police officer approached the man fired a weapon at the officer. Luckily, the officer was not struck by this gunfire, but the man got away. The night of August 23rd, 1987, when the boys died, the same suspicious man was seen again walking down a road near the railroad tracks where the boys were killed. This man has never been identified. Could he have something to do with the boys' deaths? Number 6. Or did the boys come across something they shouldn't have seen? There is much speculation when it comes to this theory. It ranges from the boys witnessing a drug deal, or perhaps they witnessed an airdrop or shipment of drugs that night. Perhaps the boys came across a drug lab, or maybe the boys witnessed something the police were doing and the police tried to cover their tracks. Were the boys killed so they wouldn't be witnesses to whatever they encountered that night? Were they just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Let's look into number 6 a little more. One witness came forward stating that on that night, the night of the train accident, he witnessed the police approach 3 boys. One took off on a motorcycle. The police beat up the remaining 2 individuals in a store parking lot. The witness said that the police then placed these individuals into a truck and left the scene. Another witness also came forward claiming that he observed the same thing between the police and some boys. The witness claimed this was around 12:30 to 1 o'clock a.m. He claimed that it was an undercover police vehicle. Some wonder if these boys could have been Kevin and Don. 6 weeks after Kevin and Don died, a similar incident happened in Oklahoma. 2 other boys met the same fate. Billy Haline, age 26, and Dennis Decker, age 21, were hit by a train while they were lying parallel to each other on the railroad tracks. These boys had alcohol in their system. Just like in the case of Kevin and Don, this case with Billy and Dennis has never been solved. Could these strange deaths be related, or is it just a strange coincidence? Let's go back to the deaths of Kevin and Don. There are a few details of this case that I think are important to discuss further. First, remember the tarp that was seen by the railroad engineer partially covering the bodies of Kevin and Don? That tarp has never been located. Was the killer still at the scene after the train ran over the boys? Did the killer retrieve the tarp and take it with him before anyone noticed his presence? Was it just not located or seen by the police that morning and not taken into evidence? Or did the train engineer forget to tell the police about the tarp, as the police claim? So they were not looking for a tarp that day. What do you think happened to the tarp? Second, if the boys were killed or unconscious before being placed on the tracks, why did the killer decide to place them on the track to be run over by a train? Were they trying to get rid of evidence? Make sure the boys were killed? Or is there another reason? Kevin's father, Larry Ives, had personal knowledge of this railroad. In fact, Larry used to work the exact train route where his son was later killed. Did this have any bearing on why the boys were placed on the tracks that day? Or was it just a coincidence that Kevin's father used to have that exact train route where his son would later die? Third, I know I said at the beginning that I wouldn't get into the rabbit holes of this case, but there is one or two I have to mention. Greg Collins testified before the grand jury in this case, and at that time had recently been questioned again by the prosecutors. On January 22nd, 1989, a year and a half after the boys died, Greg apparently went into the woods. It is alleged that he went hunting. He was later found with three shotgun injuries. Needless to say, he was found dead. 2 shotgun blasts to the chest and 1 to his face. Guess who the medical examiner was? Yep, the same one, Dr. Malik. And he ruled this death a suicide. 3 shotgun injuries, and it is ruled a suicide? Unbelievable. I definitely must be missing something. Could Greg's death be related to Kevin and Dawn's murder? Greg's friend, Keith Coney, also died of mysterious circumstances. He had told his mother before he died that he knew something about the deaths of Kevin and Dawn. He claimed that he had been with them that very night. Keith died when his motorcycle crashed into the back of a semi-truck. Now, that doesn't sound too suspicious until witnesses to that accident were interviewed. Apparently, Keith was being chased and he swerved into the back of the truck. He also had injuries that were not consistent with a motorcycle accident. His throat was slashed, and an autopsy was never performed on Keith. Before his death, he had told his father that he was with Kevin and Dawn that night, and they all were approached by a police officer. He told his father that he took off on his motorcycle and he didn't know what happened to Don and Kevin. This fits the story of the witness who came forward and stated that he witnessed 3 boys being approached by the police. One left on a motorcycle, and the other 2 were beat up by the police and put inside a vehicle. Could Keith have been attacked, got away on his motorcycle, just to die in an accident with a semi? Could this accident be related to Kevin and Don's death in any manner? Multiple other witnesses or people that were called before the grand jury ended up dying under mysterious circumstances, and some are even missing to this day. This case even became a book called The Boys on the Tracks, written by Mara Leverett. If you want to read further about this case, that book would be a great place to start. The death of Kevin and Don has never been solved. In 2016, Linda Ives, Kevin's mother, filed paperwork under the Freedom of Information Act, trying to get various agencies to turn over documents related to her son's death. Unfortunately, the case was dismissed. The families believe that the boys were killed after they witnessed a drug deal or drug drop, and then placed on those tracks after they died. Do you think the family is correct? Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button so I know you enjoy hearing mysterious true crime cases. Also, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you will be notified of my future videos. And follow me on social media as well to see what I am working on next. As always, have a wonderful day. Watch out for each other and keep looking for that missing link. Love ya and see you in my next video.